Welcome back to a chilling night of tales. Here are 3 school kidnapping stories. My middle school bully stalked and attacked me. For context, I am from a small town that houses 3 different elementary schools and only 1 middle school and high school, connected by the gymnasium and a tunnel between the 2 buildings. I had lived there my entire life, and I went to a different school than most other people mentioned in this story. Back when I was in middle school, I had a litany of bullies who loved making every moment of my day a living hell. They did pretty much everything you could think of, ranging from pranks in the middle of class to downright physical assault. But all of them were nothing compared to this one girl I met at the beginning of 7th grade, whom we're going to call Sadie. Sadie was a stereotypical mean girl in every sense of the word. Loved fashion, had a gaggle of friends willing to do her bidding, and every guy was into her or wanted her. She was the kid with the highest amounts of detentions, argued a lot with teachers, and the principal pretty much did nothing about her actions, and made a habit of having fun with some specific kids, which included me. I was a plus-sized kid, a scaredy cat, gullible, and a bit of a pushover. But I did try to do well in school and kept to myself, but that didn't do much. As soon as Sadie took notice of me, she took it upon herself to make sure every time we even saw each other, she'd make me miserable. At the beginning, it wasn't anything much. She started rumors about me, talked shit about me online. I didn't have social media yet, so I didn't find that out until later. And in school, and threw things at me that ranged from her garbage to one of her textbooks. It wasn't terrible at first. Sadie was annoying, sure, but I had workarounds, so I just ignored her. But when other kids saw that I wasn't going to fight back, they joined in and took things way too far. Almost daily, I have been chased in the halls, ganged up on in the bathrooms, had my food stolen, gotten blamed by the teachers for their dumb actions in class, and many other things. These kids had me on edge and feeling practically worthless for the entire school year, to the point of me considering just running away to avoid the hell of going back to school. Why didn't I tell the school, you may ask? Well, I tried. Dozens of times. Teachers, guidance counselors, even the principal. But they didn't care. The school was honestly not the best, and they were pretty negligent to everything that didn't involve funds, sports events, and GPA for the year. So, they gave no heed to me when I tried to tell them what was going on with Sadie and her lackeys. These are some of their real responses from incidents that happened. When I had gotten my backpack thrown down the stairs and a calculator inside that I brought from home got broken. It's your property, your problem. When Sadie had written a fat joke alongside a slur on my locker door in permanent marker. You have no evidence that it was her. When Sadie's boy toy and his friends cornered me outside the changing rooms for gym to ask me for something they were probably just kidding around. All of them spearheaded by Sadie, who was practically in charge that year, and nothing she did was getting her into trouble. Summer could not come fast enough that year. By the time 7th grade was over, they let those kids get away with so much. I honestly gave up on trying to get outside help at that point. As I got some personal help that summer, I decided that things would be different by the time I had to go back to school for the following year. I was not going to be Sadie's personal punching bag anymore. When 8th grade started up, I was ready. I learned MMA self-defense. I defended myself vocally. I wasn't so quiet anymore, and I fought back. And it worked. None of the old bullies from last year even looked my way again. Except for Sadie, who still tried to pull her usual stunts. But the longer I showed her I didn't care, the more it pissed her off. Honestly, it felt like ample revenge to all of the shit she put me through last year. Sadie, however, would not let it go for the life of her. I didn't know it then, but this whole act of hers would end up taking a bad turn. One day I was walking to the gym, with Sadie following close behind me. She did not share a gym class with me, but she did like following me around in between classes and trying to get a rise out of me. This day, however, was not great for me. I don't exactly remember why now, but I was stressed out and I kept getting pissed off over whatever went wrong that day. Sadie following behind, trying out different insults and comments about me, sent me over the edge. In a quick motion, I stopped walking, spun around, pushed Sadie backwards, and spit towards her, with it landing on her leg. I told her to just fuck off and leave me alone. I didn't know what I was really expecting her reaction to be, but it sure as hell wasn't what she did. Sadie just stood there, frozen, staring at me. I expected her to be coughing up blood from rage, or her screaming, or anything at all. But she just stood there, as if a deer in the headlights. I didn't think about it at the time, as I left for gym not long after, and eventually forgot about it. After school, I was walking across the school building to head for the parking lot next to the high school building, where I was to catch the bus. Everything felt normal, until I saw Sadie not far behind me. I didn't think anything weird of it, so ignored it and kept walking, until I noticed she was taking the same path I was to the buses. This wouldn't be odd if she actually rode the buses at all. Sadie walked to and from school every single day. If not that, someone would come pick her up. But the carpool lot was in the opposite direction of the buses. I took a different path than my normal route, around the back of the school. I looked back to check, and yep, Sadie was taking the exact same path I was, and she stopped walking every time I looked back at her. I began picking up the pace a bit, and from behind I could hear her running to catch up. By the time I was nearing the bus lot, she was somewhere around 10 feet right behind me, still jogging to follow me. I definitely did not want her to learn which bus was mine, nor did I want her to follow me home, so I decided to fake her out. I jumped onto a different bus, much to the dismay of the driver, and Sadie ran in after me. After she got in front of the bus driver to yell at her about something, I ran off and raced to my actual bus, which was all the way on the other end where this particular bus was. I got in, and the bus drove away just as Sadie got off to see where I went. The next day, I didn't see Sadie anywhere at school. Not in any of the classes, not at lunch, not even after school either. I asked, but nobody knew where she went. This went on for the rest of the week. The bus incident took place on a Monday, and the disappearing act happened on Tuesday. By Thursday, I began to relax about the whole thing. I still didn't understand what Sadie was doing with the whole bus incident, but as long as she was gone, things felt okay, until Friday afternoon came along. Like the last few days, Sadie wasn't there, so I was pretty relaxed for most of it. When the end of the school day came, I was about to walk out the front doors to the building when something stopped me. I had a horrible feeling in my stomach, telling me not to go outside. I had no idea where that came from, but I thought it was just my leftover anxiety playing tricks on me. So, I headed out anyway, not still twisting. The middle school and high school were all a part of one connecting path system, which means we all had hallways and walkways connecting both the main middle school and the main high school buildings, with one long sidewalk path out front. The parking lot where I had to walk to my bus was on the opposite end of this long sidewalk, which ran in front of both the middle school and in front of the high school. This can make for a pretty long walk, and the doors leading into the high school, often flooded with students, make for some interesting obstacles. This would all come into play when this happened. I had just walked down the outside stairs to the sidewalk when I saw someone run around a corner from the building. I looked over and it was Sadie, looking as pissed as a rabid dog, full sprinting right towards me. I bolted, running faster than I ever had in my whole life, running off nothing but pure adrenaline and fear. Sadie was catching up quickly behind me, and all I could do was run and pray for help. I dodged between crowds of kids and just tried that to lose her somewhere in the masses, not caring at all if I bumped into people, only afraid that Sadie was still behind me. By the time I reached the buses, I didn't see her anywhere, so I stopped and nearly collapsed to catch my breath. I felt relief for only a second, until she popped out of nowhere from the side of the crowd and lunged at me. Sadie grabbed me by the hair and backpack, swinging me around in a circle as I tried to get her off me. She kept pulling and jerking so much I felt my hair being ripped at some points, but she kept going. I screamed for help, kicking and punching blindly in Sadie's direction, but either nobody wanted to get involved or were too scared to break us up, because there was nobody who came forward. Sadie let go of my hair to reach for something behind her, and what happened next was only a miracle. My older brother was walking out of the high school drinking a soda when he saw the scene and ran to help. He was the only one who knew about Sadie and recognized her when we had gotten to school in the mornings. He threw his soda at Sadie's head, which startled her enough to let me go and drop whatever she was holding. I grabbed my brother and we took off for the bus, making it just before it drove off. After we found a seat, I looked back outside. What I saw still gives me chills. Sadie was on the ground, arms pinned by a teacher, and right on the ground next to her was an open hunting knife. I knew without a doubt that was hers, because of the sound I heard when she dropped it earlier. Next Monday, I got called down to the office where my brother was also waiting. We got pulled into the counselor's office where there were 2 police officers waiting. Apparently, after we ran, a high school teacher saw Sadie picking up the weapon and apprehended her, while another person called the police. They got Sadie into interrogation, and now they needed to hear what happened from me. I practically broke down right then and there and told them everything. What Sadie did to me last year, what I almost did because of her torment, the bus incident the week prior, and what happened on the sidewalk. My brother put his arm around me while I just sat there, nearly sobbing my words out. The police and the counselor just sat there writing down what I said, but they looked on sympathetically. One of the officers asked me if I would like to tell my parents so they could press charges. At this point, I just wanted everything to end about this horrible situation and be done. So I just told them to do whatever they wanted. I just wanted this to stop. The counselor could tell I was already upset enough, so he sent me back to class, and me and my brother made a promise to never speak of this again. Sadie ended up getting into juvie for the rest of the school year, all the way until halfway through second semester of freshman year of high school. The school also had some changes to it too. Police officers were now on duty during school hours in the middle and high schools. We had stricter policies with bullying, and kids could now stay with teachers before, during, after school if they needed to. I never saw Sadie again after that, not even in passing. I later learned from one of her old friends that after senior year she dropped out to get her GED because the incident on her police record meant college was impossible. It's been over 9 years since that day on the sidewalk. I will admit, this is honestly not as bad as what other kids probably had to go through, but I still feel the trauma from that time in middle school, and especially from what Sadie did to me. After middle school, I had developed depression, severe social anxiety, and PTSD from the bullies. I can't fully blame the situation for everything, as maybe if I pushed a bit harder with the teachers and the principal, maybe this wouldn't have happened in the first place. But eventually things did end up getting better. I just wish I could go back to my 13-year-old self that had to endure all of that to say that everything was going to be okay. I am doing better now. I am looking into therapy. I am in university right now, and I cannot be prouder of how far I've come. So, to the psychopath of a bully that tormented me all those years ago and almost stabbed me, let's not meet again. Story 2. After School Nightmare. This story goes back a few years ago when I was a 17-year-old high school student. Every day I'd walk the 25 or 30-minute journey to and from school. There was a shortcut I could take home that took some time off of the walk, and as a nature lover, the shortcut was very enjoyable. Whenever I'd walk home alone, I would take this shortcut to enjoy the small amount of forest we have in the medium-sized, moderately busy city I live in. My shortcut was pretty well traveled, and I would occasionally see other people walking from their neighborhood towards the busy streets close by, or other students walking home from my high school or to college. Sometimes there would be no one but me on the path. To give you an idea, the path definitely was not groomed, but it was traveled enough you could make out a path from being trampled over the years. The shortcut started off from the busy road by my high school and went into a low-lying open wooded area with some small ponds. After a few minutes of this, I could veer right up the big hill towards the street parallel to my street. One day I was walking home from school after staying a bit late for extra help. A few minutes into my shortcut, I noticed a guy standing off the main path a bit, seemingly minding his own business and talking on a cell phone. There was an open backpack sitting on the ground by his feet. Growing up with overprotective parents and in martial arts, I have always been a very cautious person and taken a lot of details, especially being a young girl out walking alone. This wasn't unusual by any means since the entire low-lying area is traveled, and there are numerous paths off the main path leading different directions, since it isn't a thick forest, sort of like a free-for-all for walking. Sometimes people would stand off the busy road while waiting for the bus stop close by, not wanting to stand in all the traffic fumes while people sped by during rush hour. The only thing I took caution of was that I had been seeing him there a few times that week and had never seen him before. But, oh well, maybe he was a college student or just moved into the area. This time walking on the shortcut felt different though, possibly because there was no one else on the path today. But I started to get this bad feeling in my stomach, the one everyone has a hard time describing but most people know too well. Something was not right. I was already well along my shortcut though, and I decided to blame my feelings on me being paranoid, which is not uncommon of me. I kept an eye on him out of my peripheral vision walking by, and he continued to talk on his cell phone and didn't seem suspicious. So I continued on my merry way. I must have walked 20 or 25 meters away when the guy stopped talking on the phone, and I felt an even bigger feeling of dread in my gut. I turn around to see him crouched over, phone gone, fidgeting around with some sort of cloth and a brown glass bottle. Before I had a second to register what the fuck he was doing, his head shoots up in my direction, and the look in his eyes is a terrifying mix between, "I've been caught," and "I'm not stopping now." He drops everything, leaving his shit behind, and starts sprinting straight for me, cloth in hand. At this point, I am too far away from the busy road for anyone to see me in the low-lying woodland with this crazy fuck, and I'm too far away to scream bloody murder. My first instinct in that split-second decision is to run towards my neighborhood. I decided this all as I turned around, throwing my heavy backpack on the ground and sprinting as fast as I could, starting up the hill towards my neighborhood. Judging by appearance, this guy looked like he could break me in two with no effort, and I trusted my flight response more than my fight response. Plus, I didn't know what the fuck he had in his hand. All throughout school, I had been the top cross-country and track runner in my entire school, out of the female and male teams. My running had been my savior on a few other let's-not-meet-worthy occasions. But soon into the chase, I knew it wouldn't be enough this time. This guy was fucking fast as shit, and I could tell he was slowly gaining on me without even looking back. I finally see some fenced-in backyards up ahead, and hoping people are home from work, I start trying to scream, "Help!" as much as I could with my out-of-breath, useless voice. I make a split decision to start jumping fences of people's yards, hoping this guy's hurdling skills are shittier than his running. The first fence throws him off, but by the second into the next yard, he is on my ass, and I feel him come insanely close to grabbing my leg. I am shitting myself at this point. I see no cars in driveways, no sign of anyone home, and the only thing that is keeping me from panicking and wiping out, in my exhausted state, is thinking that I may not ever see my family or friends again. The next yard belongs to people I know rather well, including their dog. Necessary background interruption. This house was close to my street on the street parallel to mine, and I have come to know their dog rather well since they recently moved in. My friend hated the shortcut, and sometimes I would walk to school with her on the street down the hill to the busy street. This dog was huge and an absolute maniac, and usually, when kids were walking to school, they would put him in the backyard instead of their front yard, since he would growl and scare the shit out of the kids walking by while he was tied outside. I love animals, so every time we'd walk by, I'd talk calmly to him through his menacing, "I'll fuck you up" barks. Every time he'd be slightly less vicious to me, until one day the nice people who lived there gave me a treat to give him, and after that, the dog was a nice stop on the way to school. The dog's name is Leo. With that next yard and my newly acquired friend in sight, I had never felt hope like I did in that moment. By some insane stroke of luck, they let him out in their backyard for the afternoon while they were at work. When Leo saw me frantically running toward him, he started wagging his tail, then looked to the guy chasing close behind me, and he started growling. I thought this would be enough to get the guy to fuck off, but no way. He started to jump over the fence the second after I did, but the dog jumped up and his teeth came so close to his face that the creep fell backwards into the other yard, straight on his ass, as I fell into the dog's yard on my ass. The creep and I stared at each other out of breath for a few seconds, while the dog was barking and jumping like mad at the fence at him. Maybe he was assessing if he could take on Leo or not. I prayed the creep didn't have a knife or something. The guy looked angrier than I've ever seen a person, and after a few seconds got up and started running back down the hill from where we came. I sat there for a few seconds in complete shock and couldn't move, until my hero started licking my face. I snapped out of it and ran to the back door and started pounding. They obviously weren't home, or else they probably would have heard what just went down. My house was close, so I jumped the fence and ran the rest of the way home and called the cops to investigate and try to find the guy. I gave them the best description I could after coming practically face to face with him. The dude's bag was gone, and so was every trace of him. They found my poor backpack in a muddy puddle, and the police told me they'd keep looking. Never saw the guy again, and I didn't hear anything more about it, and after calling the office a few times I gave up. They told me during that time they had received sketchy reports, people being stalked, chased, etc., but nothing like mine. Over the last few months, and there were a few missing person cases, but in a city like the one I'm from, not the worst, but not the best. You can never connect anything like that for sure. The more I thought about it over the years, the more fucked up it is and the more confused I am. First, if he was trying to kidnap me, why didn't he think of a better way to grab and snatch me into the forest before I had the chance to get away, or before another trail goer possibly walked by? He didn't appear to have a weapon on him or anything except that creepy cloth. And what the hell did he have in his hand? A friend thought it may have been chloroform, but I did research on it, and apparently it's more a myth that pouring it on a rag and covering a person's face causes them to faint very quickly. Plus, where the hell would you get it anyway? Thanks to that asshole, I never walked the shortcut anymore without at least 2 friends, and pepper spray or some sort of protection. So, sex trade kidnapper, amateur stalker, serial killer, or whatever the fuck you are, let's never ever meet again. Leo got lots of extra lovings whenever I saw him. Story 3. Almost kidnapped from a park while waiting for my school bus. So, when I was in H's, it was my senior year. I was 5'3", about 95 pounds. I was at the park down the street from my house waiting for the school bus. Usually my boyfriend, who was already graduated, would drive me to school, but he was busy. I later found out he was cheating. Well, there was usually a few of us girls there waiting, but this day, I was the only one. So I sat at a bench and had one headphone in and one out so I could listen to my surroundings. I've always been cautious of what's going on around me. As I waited, a black Honda pulled up, and I immediately noticed it. I kept an eye on it because I had a bad feeling about it. I wasn't making it obvious that I was watching it because I didn't want to look crazy, but after a few minutes, 2 big men got out. I immediately texted my boyfriend that I was at the park, and these guys were creeping me out. Of course, he didn't text back, so I copy-pasted the same text to my cousin who was home. I lived with my aunt and 2 guy cousins. Unwinding down from the night shift, I wanted someone to know the car make and color, plus it was 2 men. Didn't get any responses. When they got out of their car, they started to walk towards me. So I got up from the bench and walked towards the street because the bus was supposed to be there any minute. The driver actually ended up being a little late. As I stood by the street, these men walked up to me and I could feel the bad energy. One guy said hello as the other stood there staring me down. I just did a small smile and a nod, then looked away. Then the same guy, I'll call him Hash One, asked how old I was. I didn't respond. I could tell the other guy, Hash 2, was getting mad that I wasn't feeding into it. Then number 1 kept asking me yes or no questions. Like, do you have a boyfriend? Do you live close? Do you do drugs? We have some. Do you want some? And then Hash 2 asked me if I knew what the black market was. I felt a cold rush go over my body and I got the chills. Hash 2, who was quiet the whole time, started to tell me they just got back from Russia, but the way he said it was so scary, almost intimidating. I knew they were from somewhere else because they had strong accents, but I couldn't pinpoint the place. They kept telling me to go to their car because they have drugs. I said no thank you. Trust me, I wasn't a straight edge in H's, but I was not stupid either. I would never get into somebody's car that I didn't know. Then number 1 asked if I have a car. I said no, and that my bus is almost here, sorry have to go. And by some sort of miracle, the bus rounded the corner and the guys backed off. They had been inching closer and closer as they asked me questions. But before the bus got to me, One handed me a card and said he has a car shop and to call him sometime if I need anything. He even stated he'd give me a free car. Nah. The card looked shifty, and I didn't want to grab it, but I knew I needed that number on it to report it. So I took it, and they walked off super fast. Finally, the bus stopped and picked me up. As soon as I got on, I started to cry. I had a complete meltdown. It was like all of the adrenaline was keeping my mind and body aware and focused while the men were there, but as soon as I was safe, my body and mind gave out. Thankfully, there weren't many people on the bus, so the driver calmed me down before we took off, and I explained to her what happened. When she looked around for the car, they were gone. She said she saw them around me but thought I knew them because they were so close to my person. The driver called into her dispatch saying that there was an incident so that they could notify the school. She continued to pick all of the other students up, but when we got to the school, she walked me into the office. I was absolutely terrified to be alone. The principal came out and so did campus security. They were so sweet and gentle with me as they brought me back to the principal's office. Both were men and they proceeded to ask me questions about the men, their car, and the questions the creeps had asked me. I cried the whole time. Then I pulled out the card the guy gave me and handed it to the principal. He looked at the security and said he was going to call it and act like my dad. So he did. It was on speaker and One answered. I knew his voice as if it was burned into my brain. It took everything in me not to have a panic attack. The principal asked the guy if he could get him a car at a good price, and the guy played dumb. The principal said his daughter, me, gave him the card. As soon as he said that, the guy hung up. They tried calling again and the phone was shut off. Then eventually disconnected. I could see a shift in the principal and security as soon as the phone clicked. The security got on his phone and called the police and had them come to the school. It was as if they finally knew it was real. Like my crazy story wasn't made up. The principal excused himself and the security guard, and they talked for a minute in the hall. I could hear everything they were saying. Pardon? She's lucky to be alive. This is serious. We need to call her parents to come get her. When the police got there, they came into the office that I was sitting in and asked me for the story again, and in front of the principal and security guard. I feel like they wanted to see if I was being 100% honest. So I obliged. The officers were straight up with me and told me it sounded like they were watching us girls at that park because they chose the one day that one of us were alone. He also said the card was being used as bait to get me to go where they wanted. I felt sick. I couldn't breathe. The school called my aunt, but she didn't pick up. The only person that picked up first was my boyfriend. One of the officers talked to him as the other finally got a hold of my aunt. My boyfriend ended up picking me up and taking me home, and I cried the whole time. When I got there, my grandma, uncle, aunt, mom, and cousins were all out front. The women were all in tears and the men were livid, but worried for me. A week later, some girl at another local high school, not far from the park, was saved by other students. She was being dragged into a black Honda by two guys. The other kids stood up and grabbed her and pulled her out of their car. The principal called me into his office, and that's how I found out. They also had the same officers there and had me choose the two guys out of a picture lineup. I pointed them out fast. Ray. They were caught. It was in fact those two guys that tried grabbing the girl. A freshman girl. I felt worried for her and sad she went through worse than I did, and I felt almost free again. Still scared, but not looking over my shoulder as often. I couldn't believe they were caught. After that, my family teamed up to drive me to school for the rest of the year. My boyfriend, now ex, also took me some days. I am thankful to be alive and well, and I am even more thankful that the girl was also saved by the courageous kids at her HS.